Today, we're talking about what it really means to establish consumer insights that enables leadership and decision making with a rich understanding of the consumer. I'm joined today by Chris Sensibaugh, Senior Director of Consumer and Shopper Insights at Newell Brands, who has been instrumental at building a culture that really leverage consumer insights. We're going to start really big picture here. What does it look like when leaders across functions within an organization truly leverage consumer insights?
I think there's some organizations that kind of break up between this is consumer insight and this is business. And I think the businesses that I've worked on that have worked the best are the ones that it's just incorporated in the everyday conversation. Back when we were doing segmentation, it was really important for us to get to every single person on the team because every single person on the team needed to take decisions on the behalf of these consumers. So instead of just showing the segmentation to marketing or just to the people that were close in, we did a grand tour and we showed marketing and R&D and design and finance and HR and people in our stores and people on the call lines and everybody who was going to interact with the consumer. We did the tour. And that made all the difference in the world because everybody knew who they were talking to and what would matter to them.
So, how do you actually create the desire for carving out that space and leadership's buy in to say, hey, this is something worth prioritizing and actually investing everyone cross functionally into this effort?
We have a mindset to say that we have to earn our seat at the table. And it's not just the seat at the table, it's the consumer seat at the table. So for the functions who don't think that they touch the consumer, that might be one level removed, we start with a function that we know will say yes. And we provide the insight to them. And then we say, can you help us make an introduction? We think this could also help the next group of people. So we use our connections and our networks to start with people that we know will say yes and have them help us sell it to the next person. So if we're doing our jobs well and opening people's minds and helping them take decisions, then they help us.
Has that ever been met with resistance or been a challenge to actually get adopted? And I'm really curious to hear about how do you balance that with yeah, I'm trying to fight for this, but I also want to feel like our team is valued and taken seriously and invited in the door.
So it's up to us to tell them what's important and why it's important. So the consumer that we do research for, the end consumer is one thing, but our internal consumers, we have to understand why they need the information that they need. What decisions are they taking? How will this piece of information help them? So we are in the habit of saying, give me a couple days and a little bit of money and I'll show you some results. I will make it so you don't have to change your timelines and I'll give you some value. Instead of us being an obstacle, we are people who are making decisions easier for people. We earn it every day.
So I've got this upcoming decision about 2027 fall lines for this product. That could be a real challenge if I'm not thinking as a leader to pause, check with insights, gauge their perspective. There's a challenge here between making a quick decision and really grounding in some foundational insights. So how do you do that?
So we spend a lot of our time thinking about how we inspire decisions versus validate decisions. So we try to get in very early in the process and really explain to people who we are building for. Who are we solving problems for? Why do they have this need? What is the one thing that would make a difference in their world? And then if we build it from the beginning, I don't have to validate it at the end. So we try to get in very early and set the tone of here's your target and this is who they are and get to know them as people. And what is their underlying need? And then it kind of takes care of itself. If we explain to creative people and problem solvers, the tinkerers of the world, what we're trying to do, they generally just do it because it's clear, right? It's clear what the objective is.
How do you think about that relationship between data, someone's intuition, and then the decisions they actually have to go make?
So we always start with the business question. What are we trying to decide? And then that drives the methodology. We get the data. And then I'm a big believer that an insight is simply a piece of data that makes somebody think. So I need to use different data with different groups of people because they all light up in a different way. If I can give them the right piece of information, they take decisions on their own. Because I have lots of data and I can answer any one question. But what I want is for people to understand enough about who that person is, what their needs are, that they can take a decision on their behalf without asking them.
There seems to be this bias for quick and bite-sized as opposed to big and foundational. And what do you think that, are the potential benefits or risks of that being the shift in the industry?
Having agile platforms, being able to go get information like that, using our websites for information is a cool new thing to use. But we have to step back and say, what am I trying to answer? And how do I get a whole group of people moving in the same direction? Because I can answer your question, but then I have to answer everybody else's individual questions. So if I understand the basic need that I'm going after and I brief everybody in the same way, very early in the project, then we all move in the same direction.
How does that fit in, this idea of living the category or engaging with products or the brand in your space, and how that impacts how your team supports brand leaders in thinking about insights from their own real world lived experiences?
In our day-to-day lives, we're in and out of stores all day long, and we see products all day long, and things come across our feeds all day long. I love to go places with my team, or I love when people show up on a Monday morning and say, "Did you see this? Our target would love this." So having that community where we bounce these things off of each other, it's easy, it's cheap, it's super fruitful.
So, what are those like little things that leaders can do to just say, I am keeping a pulse on insights in my space so that they have an intuition grounded in something that is real and representative of who they're serving?
So we've got a program right now where we use friends and family of the teams that we've got, and we asked to come to their homes. We were just in people's backyards last week, taking a look at how they handle storage, what they do in their backyard. And across a number of interviews, we just kind of got some patterns, and we train our brains on what people are looking for. What are the commonalities? What are the differences? And that's inexpensive. It takes time. It's expensive in time, but it does not take a lot of budget. It's the one thing I would ask everybody to do.
People who love categories love talking about them, right? And I bet we often find when you're actually sitting down and asking someone their opinion, they would love to tell you about it.
And that's why we love partnering with Langston, because you guys are curious. So you go out and do some of this research before you help us with our big quantitative studies too. I've seen you guys go out and take on that little bit of information to make sure that we're getting the right questions and the right response options into a questionnaire. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of a piece of quantitative research and going, we missed a question. So doing that bit of homework ahead of time where you've got really interesting hypotheses about what's going on with people's whys, not just what they do, but why they do it, their jobs to be done, is a really important step in getting those foundational pieces of research done well. Because we understand not just what's going on with people, but potentially why it's happening.
We get to work across so many categories, and I know you get to do that as well. How does that help sharpen your own intuition around what to ask or what to look for when it comes to insights?
At Newell, we are a house of brands. Categories from tents and sleeping bags to water bottles and baby carriers and pens, right? And when we had to do brand health tracking, we said, is there a way for us to do this where we can learn more than the individual categories? So we have a standard approach to brand health tracking where we've got a certain set of standard metrics. And a standard flow, and it allows us to take competitors that also go across brands or across categories, and take a look at them. But it's also allowing us to think in terms of meta-analysis to say, are there underlying things that are happening between categories, like our kitchen brands? We think in the kitchen now instead of food storage and coffee makers. Take a look at all of it together to see what are the solutions for a total kitchen.
So I'm curious, with this perspective you have around this is how we view not just insights, but elevating insights within the organization, how do you actually go about the process of evaluating the many, many options that you have in front of you in terms of partners?
So with partners, certainly there are a lot of suppliers that do a lot of the same things. The same platforms are available. The methodologies are all relatively similar. I want the curious people, the people that say, that when I say, I wonder why that happened. What if? And I have partners that will say, let me look into it. We knew that was coming. We collected the right data. Let's cut it a different way or do a different analysis or really take a look a little bit deeper. So when I'm looking for partners, I'm looking for those foundational pieces of research where there's a lot of data sitting there in there, and we can just move things around until something shows itself. And I think that's where the magic is finding the other people that are curious enough to say, what if?
Last, imagine someone is, starting their own team or maybe is recently brought into an organization. What's that first small step you'd recommend that they take in terms of building this culture of insight-led decision making?
I think step one is going out and talking to people and bringing back the story. So I think in consumer insights right now, we are very data driven. And I have been more successful in talking about Magda, the horse owner, and telling her story and saying, this is what she needs. And by the way, when we back it up with consumer data, it's not just Magda. So going out, learning people, understanding their whys, and having the story to tell, I think is what gets you another meeting, another at bat, another seat at the table.